There is a master formula for wiping an entire people off the map without the world lifting a single finger. Step 1. Legally strip them of their citizenship. Step 2. Ban their ancestral homes and liquidate their economy. Step 3. Hire a foreign army to starve them out and tell the global media it's just a complicated civil war. If you are satisfied believing that the Eastern Congo is just a chaotic primitive playground where random militias eliminate each other over names you can't pronounce, then hit the button back. Sleep well in your ignorance, but if you are still watching, it means you suspect what the global elite are desperate to hide. It is the perfect crime, and right now, in the mountains of the Eastern Congo, it is working flawlessly. Before the political troll farms try to mass report this video, let's establish the facts. Every claim in this investigation is anchored in documented reality. This dossier is built on declassified United Nations reports, international law, human rights investigation, verifiable economic data, and independent field documentation. It is further supported by genocide prevention research, pre-reviewed academic studies, and the records of independent field investigators operating directly on the ground. We are not indicting the citizens of the Congo or Burundi. We are examining a documented pattern of a state behavior. Right now on this planet, in this year 2026, a human laboratory experiment is taking place in the mountains of South Kivu. The hypothesis of this experiment is simple. Can you completely erase an entire distinct ethnic community from the face of the earth without building the kind of highly visible industrial killing system that became synonymous with the horrors of the 20th century? Without launching a highly visible 100 days campaign of extermination like the world saw in Rwanda in 1994? And without triggering a single superpower to stop trading with you? The subject of this experiment are the Banyamulenge, a Congolese Tutsi community. The method is what human rights experts call systematic erasure. It is a calculated, highly sophisticated chokehold designed to make their physical survival impossible over time. While the world watches, buys the minerals beneath their feet, and stays completely silent. Beyond the headlines, this is the DRC reality on the ground. This is Afrimedia Network Lens, and today we are opening the dossier. We are going to take the polished propaganda machine of the Kinshasa government, the Burundian military and their international PL farms, and we are going to dismantle it piece by piece, lie by lie. To cut through the noise, this entire investigation will be guided by 5 ultimate questions that every person watching must answer. These 5 questions form an airtight legal trap that the perpetrators cannot escape. But to understand this trap, you only need to understand 3 baseline facts. The Banyamulenge are cattle-herding, Congolese minority of Tutsi heritage who have lived in these mountains for centuries. Second, the high plateaus of Minembwe form a natural mountain fortress completely cut off from the rest of the country. And third, local Mai and state-backed Wazalendo militias have spent years trying to push them off those mountains. With that map in your mind, let's test the case. Question 1, the legal cage. If the Congolese government is not executing targeted demographic campaign, why did the state systematically strip this specific indigenous community of its citizenship? And why does it continue to enforce an administrative erasure by denying them identity cards today? Question 2, the economic liquidation. Why are hundreds of thousands of ancestral cattle systematically targeted, rounded up, and openly liquidated on government-regulated markets if this is just a standard war against armed rebels? Question 3, the political propaganda shield. Does the presence of a few highly elevated Banyamulenge political advisors in luxury offices in Kinshasa prove the state isn't complicit? Or are they mimicking a terrifying historical blueprint of using elite human hostage as political cover? Question 4, the hostage trap. Why does the military coalition maintain a catastrophic starving blockade on the civilian population of Minembwe while claiming to protect their relatives, the exact same ethnic group just a few miles away in the enclave of Biwogobogo? Question 5. The foreign enforcer. Why would the National Army of Burundi cross an international border to deploy advanced heavy weapons, escorts art techniques, and economic blockades against a community inside the Democratic Republic of the Congo? What strategic interest is driving their actions? Let's step into facts. Let's begin the breakdown. To understand how this experiment works, you have to unlearn what Hollywood taught us about systematic atrocities. When the United Nations drafted the 1948 Genocide Convention, they had just witnessed industrial-scale elimination in Europe. But the architects of that treaty, driven by legal genius Raphael Lemkin, knew that overt violence is only one way to destroy a people. Look at the screen. Article 2, Act C on the UN Genocide Convention. It states that the ultimate crime is committed when group or state deliberately inflicts on the group condition of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Notice the wording. It does not say you must strike them all today. It says you can create conditions of life that guarantee they will simply fade away tomorrow. This is the exact blueprint being executed against the Banyamulenge. It is an architecture of invisible elimination structured through 3 distinct pillars. Pillar 1, legal dehumanization. It didn't start with bullets, it started with a pen. In 1981, the Congolese state passed a citizenship law, specifically Nationality Law number 81002, which created a legal vacuum that retroactively stripped the Banyamulenge of their nationality. Overnight, people who had lived on the high plateaus for centuries, long before modern borders were even drawn, were legally converted into foreign invaders and illegal immigrants. Once you stripped a community of their legal identity, you make their removal politically accepted. Pillar 2, asset eradication. The Banyamulenge are a traditional pastoralist society. Their cattle are not just property, they are their milk, their food security, their generational wealth, and their entire cultural backbone. According to data compiled by community organizations and field investigators, over 600,000 heads of cattle have been systematically looted, removed, or liquidated over the last decade. If you take away a pastoralist cattle, you aren't just robbing him, you are systematically destroying his children's ability to survive on that land. Pillar 3, the starvation blockade. Right now, the highland hub of Minembwe, the last major sanctuary for this community, is under a total military blockade. A coalition of the Congolese National Army, Burundian forces, and local militias have completely ringed the mountains. They have cut off trade routes. They blocked medicine. They prevented humanitarian aid from ascending. According to reports, eyewitnesses' accounts, and humanitarian monitoring, the blockade has produced a famine-like condition across parts of the high plateaus. This is the baseline reality. This is the foundation of the case. But now it's time to put those claims under the microscope. Let's take the pro-Kinshasa narrative and examine them one by one and see whether it survives contact with the evidence. We have established the framework of the crime. Now we are going to dive directly into the courtroom to dismantle the ultimate legal defense used by the Congolese government, their 2006 constitution, and their failed state alibi. Welcome back to the investigation. Let's open the dossier. Now that we have established the structural framework of this systematic erasure, it's time to put their official defense under the microscope. If you talk to a legal representative or a digital defender of the Kinshasa government, they will confidently pull out their ultimate trump card. They will look at you in the eyes and say, hold on, you are talking about things that happened under the old Mobutu dictatorship back in 1981? And doesn't the 2006 Congolese constitution grant them full citizenship rights? They will point at the cameras and say, hold on, didn't President Felix Tshisekedi himself go on a national television and explicitly declare that Banyamulenge are Congolese citizens? This isn't a state-sponsored campaign. It is just a weak state struggling to protect its borders from chaotic rebel groups.
Je suis le seul, si pas le premier en tout cas président de la République démocratique du Congo, à avoir dit haut et fort en parlant des Banyamulenge, mais j'élargis même à tous les Tutsis congolais que ce sont nos compatriotes. Parce que je dois attirer ici l'attention de tout le monde et c'est très dangereux d'avoir ce genre de discours. Vous faites le tapis de ce régime criminel du Rwanda.
It sounds convincing, doesn't it? But today we are going to look behind the curtain and test whether the explanation matches reality on the ground. The televised excuse. Let's dissect this broadcast illusion. First, ask yourself a logical question. Why did he have to say it? The president never goes on a national television to remind the country that the Babembe are Congolese. He never has to declare that the Bafuriru are Congolese citizens. The very fact that a head of state has to go on a national television to explicitly validate one specific ethnic group proves that their erasure is already deeply institutionalized. Second, look at the reality on the ground. Does a television speech rebuild hundreds of banned central villages? Does a television speech return the nearly 1 million looted cows sold openly on a government-regulated market? Does a soundbite rebuild their hospitals and schools? And here is the darkest truth about those schools and hospitals. The Congolese state never built them in the first place. Every single clinic, every single school, and every single church in the high plateaus were built by the Banyamulenge community themselves or by independent NGOs. The state completely abandoned them for decades. And according to data compiled by humanitarian monitors up to April 2026, the state-backed Wazalendo militias have banned 147 schools and 57 health centers have been documented and destroyed completely on the ground. They have systematically destroyed more than 600 central villages, resulting in the depopulation of 95% of central Banyamulenge lands in South Kivu. And then the state-backed Wazalendo militias burned those exact same community-funded hospitals to the ground. When a president preaches citizenship on a broadcast while state-backed proxy militias systematically destroyed civilians' infrastructure, it is not leadership. It is an optical illusion. It is performative diplomacy designed to give Western donors plausible deniability. The operational loophole, Article 10. Now, look at the text of Article 10 in the 2006 DRC Constitution. It states that nationality is granted to ethnic groups present on territory at the time of independence in 1960. On paper, the Banyamulenge qualifies, but here is the trick. A right only exists if the state gives you the tool to exercise it. The identity weapon, who controls the birth registries, who issues national voter and identity cards, the Congolese state. By systematically refusing to conduct census or issue centralized national identity documents in the South Kivu highlands, the government creates a legal paradox. On paper, you have rights. On the ground, you do not possess the physical card required to prove it. De facto statelessness. If you cannot get documented, you cannot legally vote. You cannot buy land. You cannot travel safely through military checkpoints. For any other Congolese citizen, a missing document is a sign of slow bureaucracy. For Banyamulenge citizens, missing paperwork is used by local authority as legal justification to rebel them a Rwandan invader and hunt them as illegal aliens.
Banyamulenge are not Congolese. I'm sorry, Tutsis, you are not Congolese. That is our Congo. You are refugees that came from Rwanda and you came to Congo because you needed a place to stay. These supposed protests that you people are...
But the propaganda machine does not stop there. When you catch them in the administrative trap, they pivot their second line of defense, the failed state excuse. They will say, what are you talking about? No one in the Congo has a proper national ID card right now. The whole country has faced identity card delays. Millions of Congolese are suffering across the country from various rebel groups. The Banyamulenge are not special. This is just the tragedy, mess reality of a fragile nation.
Notre pays, c'est 450 tribus. Et c'est pas que avec les Tutsis congolais qu'il y a des problèmes. Il y a des problèmes même, on l'a vu récemment, pour les Kassaïens, les Louba du Kasaï au Katanga. C'est pas pour ça que l'Angola, qui a aussi des populations loubaphones, se lève un matin pour dire ça y est, moi je vais au Katanga pour défendre les Louba du Kasaï qui sont menacés. Les Teke et les Yaka ont des problèmes ici. Le Congo-Brazza qui en compte, ainsi que le Gabon, ne se réveille pas pour dire voilà, on va défendre les Teke à Kwamut, etc. Donc c'est totalement farfelu comme histoire. Nous sommes un pays souverain. Nous sommes capables de défendre nos propres concitoyens et nous sommes en mesure de les sécuriser.
This argument is highly effective because it leverages a real humanitarian tragedy to mask a specific targeted policy. Yes, the DRC is a fragile state. Yes, millions of Congolese are suffering from regional violences. But there is massive legal and moral defenseless between widespread casualty of a civil war and a targeted campaign of demographic removal. Let's look at the story facts that destroyed this alibi. A state that claims it's too weak to protect Banyamulenge villages from being burnt by local militias is somehow powerful enough to deploy advanced combat drones, heavy artillery, and thousands of regular troops to enforce a permanent talking blockade around the high plateaus of Minembwe. The state isn't failing to protect them due to weaknesses. The state is actively using the military infrastructure to isolate them. To say everyone is suffering equally is a classic deflection technique used throughout history to make targeted atrocities invisible. During the darkest chapter of World War II, millions of European civilians perished from bombing, starvation, and general warfare. But those tragic deaths did not change the historical fact that specific Jews minority population were being uniquely systematically targeted for total physical elimination. A constitution that grants you citizenship on paper while the state denies you physical documents to prove it, strips you for your livestock, and blocks your medicine is not a shield. It is a legal excuse used to deceive international donors while demographic erasure continues uninterrupted. We have completely dismantled the legal and administrative defense of the Kinshasa government. But now we have to look at the most insidious political tactic of all, the use of human shield in the high offices. In the next part, we are going to look at how the state uses prominent Banyamulenge to trick the world, and we will expose divide and rule hostage trap of Bibogobogo. Now that we have exposed the legal and administrative smokescreen, we have to confront the most sophisticated political weapon in the government arsenal. When you back a pro-Kinshasa defender into a corner with hard facts, they will lean back and present their ultimate optical illusion. If this is a targeted campaign against the Banyamulenge, why does President Felix Tshisekedi have prominent Banyamulenge figures working inside his most trusted inner circle? Look at Jack Kongolo Bigirungami, appointed as a personal advisor inside the presidency. Look at the wealthy, well-treated Banyamulenge elites living in luxury in Kinshasa and Uvira. How can a state dismantle a community while putting its leaders in the hall of power? It is a brilliant piece of public relations. It is designed to make international observers throw up their hands and say, well, it must just be a complicated political dispute. But today, we are going to expose these facts for what it truly is. The propaganda shield and the hostage trap. To understand why the administration elevates a few prominent individuals while its army blockades their families in the mountains, you have to look at the history. This is the exact replica of the Theresia stand blueprint. During the 1940s, facing mounting rumors about the systematic abuses, the ruling regime established a model camp called Theresia stand or Terezin. They filled it with prominent artists, scholars, and veterans. They treated them marginally better, allowed them to hold concerts, and even invited international inspectors to view it. They pointed at the Terezin and told the world, see, how can we be committing a crime when these prominent individuals are living safely under our care? It was a total calculated lie. The model camp was a propaganda shield used to blind international diplomats. But the math reveals the horrifying truth. Of the 140,000 people paraded through that so-called safe zone, tens of thousands died from intentional starvation. And once the political utility of the shield expired, those exact same co-opted elites were loaded onto trains. More than 88,000 of those protected individuals were shipped directly to industrial elimination centers like Auschwitz. The illusion of safety was merely a waiting room for the eradication. The temporary protection of Banyamulenge in Wibogowogo or the co-opted Banyamulenge elites in luxury offices in Kinshasa, figures like Jack Kongolo serve a similar political function today. They act as institutional window dressing to mask the operational realities on the ground. When the United Nations or human rights watchdogs accuse the DRC of persecuting an ethnic campaign, Kinshasa points directly at these appointments. But an advisor signature on a piece of paper in the capital does not stop a combat drone from drawing a payload on a civilian in Minembwe. They say the Banyamulenge in Wibogowogo are completely safe under the protection of the Burundian, Wazalendo, and Congolese armies. If we wanted them gone, they will be gone. The only reason there is a blockade in Minembwe is because Minembwe refuses to surrender. Let's dismantle this divide and root trap by looking at recent documented psychological operation. The state recently deployed Jack Kongolo out of his luxury office and sent him directly into the Wibogowogo enclave. But he didn't go alone. He arrived alongside the Burundian army and General Amri Yakutumba, a notorious Maimai militia leader, who famously known for hunting down Banyamulenge and calling them foreigners who occupied their land. They gathered the trapped Banyamulenge civilians in Wibogowogo, shoved cameras in their faces, and interrogated them. They demanded the civilians publicly testifying that there is no genocide and that the government is actively protecting them.
Hamkukufa nyinyi wenyewe, na hii makabila yengine mlikuwa mkipigana imekufa. Hii neno ya pole ni kwa makabila zote. Hii neno ya kukosa vitu na mali na watu ni kwa makabila yote. Lakini rais amesema niwaelezee pole sana. Lakini anataka kitu kimoja. Mumsaidie tutafute amani.
This operational relies on three specific tactical mechanisms. Mechanism 1, the lure of submission. The safety of Wibogowogo is used as bait.
Kusema vile mwenzangu anaisha kusema vile amani tuko hapa Ibokoboko, warahia ya kutoka Burundi na hapa ya FRDC tunaishi mzuri sana tena sana. Hakuna tena aseme iko politiki, hapana. Tunaishi mzuri sana sana.
The goal was to broadcast this forced confession out to the besieged mountains of Minembwe, sending the message to the Twigwaneho defendants. Look at your relatives. They are safe. Lay down your guards. Surrender your weapons. This is a psychological trap designed to trick the defenders into dismantling their own walls from within. Mechanism 2. The human shield. Just like the allies in Kinshasa, the peaceful pockets of Bibogobogo is used as physical proof to deny human rights allegation to the international community. But even under the intimidation of armed commanders, the truth bled through. When forced to answer if they were safe, several civilians bravely broke the script. They stated on camera that they do not sleep the entire night. They pointed out that glaring hypocrisy. How can they be safe when other communities travel freely to the market in Baraka while the Banyamulenge are completely trapped? How can they be safe when their brothers and sisters in Minembwe cannot even access a market?
Sisi population Bibokoboko tuko rahi, hatuko bafanya siasa, tuko batu bakulima, tuko batu bakufuga tu, lakini shida tulipata mwa hii mlima ni shida ya ajabu. Benye balitupiga huku ni bazalendo bamheshimiwa generali ya Kutumba, njo benye balitutesa hapa, benye balitushambulia hapa ni Rede Tabara. Bote balikuwa banachangana, bakamaliza mangombe, bakamaliza mbuzi, bakamaliza mashamba, bakabomora manyumba yote mingine yote, bakaangusha na manjanja yote bakabira. Tunaomba amani. Sisi raia Bibokoboko tunaomba amani. Tufike Baraka, tupate masepejere, twende tupite barabara, twende Burundi kama nifasi wapi, lakini tupite njia ya barabara. Hata leo hivi hatukulala. Ile niombe sasa napana kwa mzee amuri ya Kutumba.
Mechanism 3. The implicit hostage. This is the darkest part of the strategy. The safety of the Banyamulenge in the area of Bibogobogo is completely conditional. It is a hostage situation. During this very same meeting, General Yakutumba made his ultimate demand. He promised to protect these compliant civilians, but only if they helped him fight the so-called invaders up in Minembwe. To convince the Banyamulenge in Bibogobogo, he intentionally framed the civilians in Minembwe and called the invaders Twigwaneho, their own flesh and blood, as foreign Rwandan threat. The people of Bibogobogo are kept safe solely to paralyze the self-defense in Minembwe. The defenders know that if they launch a massive, deceived military counter-offensive to break the starvation blockade of Minembwe, the government can instantly turn around and allow extremist militias to liquidate the undefended compliant population in Bibogobogo. By splitting the community into two compliant hostages who get temporary protection and Twigwaneho resistors who are marked for death, the state and militias are actively trying to turn relatives against each other. They are trying to fragment the community's leadership, weaken the collective survival, and break resistance from within. Conditional protection is not humanitarian care. It is a tactical weapon. History shows that an eliminationist regime never needs to remove every single member of the group at the exact same second to achieve its goal. It pacifies one pocket, uses them as political shield, isolates the resistance, and then when the resistance is starved out, it moves in to complete the erasure. The safety of Bibogobogo lasts only as long as the state needs it for political leverage. We have unmasked psychological warfare. We have exposed the political shield at the hostage trap. But now we must look at the battlefield itself. Now we are going to look direct at the armed resistance. We will answer the ultimate questions. Why does Twigwaneho exist in the first place? And we will expose the damning documented evidence of the transactional deal between the Congolese National Army and the eradication militias on the ground. Let's now enter the heart of the military deception. When you strip away the legal alibis and the political shield, the pro-Kinshasa narrative relies on a single aggressive piece of battlefield finger pointing. They will tell you the only reason the military coalition blockades Minembwe is because it is under the control of Twirwaneho militia. And Twirwaneho is a proxy force working directly for the Rwandan-backed M23 rebellion. If Banyamulenge want peace, all they have to do is drop their weapons, let the national army in to clear the area and the conflict ends. This argument is highly effective on international diplomats because it taps into the very real regional fear of the M23 conflict. But the historical record tells a different story. It relies on a complete and intentional reversal of causes and effects. It hides a massive truth by completely erasing why Twirwaneho had to exist in the first place, and it covers up a dark operational alliance on the ground. Let us look at the actual genesis of this conflict and blow this narrative completely out of the water. The government wants you to believe that Twirwaneho brought war to the peaceful high plateaus in South Kivu. Let's correct the record with hard historical timelines. The complete security vacuum, Twirwaneho, which is literally translated from Kinyarwanda to mean let us defend ourselves, was not formed to invent foreign territory or serve a neighboring state. Long before the modern M23 rebellion even resurfaced, local Mai Mai militias were already executing coordinated, Scott-art campaigns to systematically burn down Banyamulenge villages. They ignored plea. Between 2017 and 2019, Banyamulenge community elders repeatedly traveled to Bukavu and Kinshasa. They held press conferences, met with the UN officials, and begged the Congolese National Army to deploy regular troops to protect their defenseless villages. The abandonment. What did the state do? Instead of protecting them, the Congolese Army FARDC systematically pulled its functioning units out of the high plateaus, leaving the civilian population entirely exposed to regional extremist functions. Twirwaneho was born out of pure desperate biological survival. To tell the people of Minembwe to lay down their weapons and trust the national army is asking a community to voluntarily walk in a calculated death trap. But it gets worse. The state claims its army is simply too weak or too far away to stop the Mai Mai from burning villages. But human rights monitors and eyewitness testimonies confirm that this isn't an issue of state weaknesses. It is an issue of active transactional collusion. It was a deal, and the evidence of this deal is undeniable. Let us look at the three documented patterns of how the National Army acts as uncompliance to the militias. Pattern 1, the weapon pipeline. Independent UN investigators have repeatedly documented instances where FARDC units openly handed over crates of ammunition and heavy weaponry to local Mai Mai grounded and foreign rebels function like Burundi's Red Tabara, just hours before those militias launched structural offensive against Banyamulenge civilians. Pattern 2, the open pathway. One multiple strategic read, FARDC units holding defensive checkpoints suddenly receive orders to vacate or stand down right as military columns approached. The National Army actively cleared the path, guiding the attackers directly into undefended civilian terrain. Pattern 3, the cold silence. There are multiple recorded accounts where FARDC military bases were located literally hundreds of meters or just a few kilometers away from the villages being burnt on the ground. Banyamulenge women and elders ran directly to the gates of these army camps, screaming for help while the smoke of their burning homes were visibly rising into the sky. The soldiers stood behind their perimeters, silently watching, refusing to fire a single round to protect them. But if you want the ultimate and undeniable proof that this is a systematic structural erasure, you have to look at the economy of the eradication. The government claims these military actions are just a messy counterinsurgents operational against rebels. But rebels do not own hundreds of thousands of cows. The military coalition didn't just chase fighters, they worked hand in hand with Mai militias to execute massive cattle rustling operation. They rounded up hundreds of thousands of Banyamulenge cattle and sold them openly on government-regulated markets in major provincial towns like Uvira and Baraka. Think about the sheer weight of that fact. The official administration and economic institution of the Congolese state actively facilitated the commercial liquidation of an entire ethnic group's primary sources of livelihood. In a pastoralist society, a cow is not just property, it is life. It is the milk that feeds the infant. It is the currency of the culture. It is the entire economic backbone that allows a community to exist on a piece of land. When you systematically burn down hundreds of central villages, wipe out entire communion structures, and liquidate their entire livestock economy on public state markets, you are executing the exact literally definition of Article 2, Act C of the UN Genocide Convention, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction of the group. The Banyamulenge history has proven that government protection is an illusion that disappears the moment the camera turns off. This is why Twirwaneho refuses to lay down its guard. They do not fight because they love war. They fight because they know that an empty guarantee of safety from colluding state is nothing more than a legal invitation to their own funeral. They know that the second they disarm, the illusion of protection shatters, the silence returns, and the final phase of their physical erasure begins. We have exposed collusion on the battlefield. We have exposed the financial liquidation of their livelihood. But now we must look at the borders. Finally, we are going to blow the lid off the international dimensions. We will ask the ultimate question: why is the National Army of Burundi crossing borders to enforce this blockade? Why are global superpowers keeping silent? And we will reveal the final defiant stand of the Highlanders. To cut the story short, we have dismantled the legal excuses, unmasked the psychological hostage trap, and exposed the transactional collusion between the army and the militias on the ground. But to clearly understand why this experiment of extinction is allowed to continue in broad daylight, we have to look across international borders. We have to answer the two most haunting questions that remain. Why will the National Army of Burundi cross an international boundary to enforce this blockade? And why do global superpowers remain completely silent, continuing to shake hands and trade with Kinshasa while an entire community is talked out of existence? Let's follow the money, the geopolitics, and the minerals. First, let's look at the Burundian military. According to regional security assessments, Burundi deployed over 20,000 troops. Why are they deploying thousands of troops, advanced heavily artillery and Scott art tactics into the South Kivu of the Congo? The answer is a toxic combination of exported ethnic politics and deadly regional proxy conflict with Rwanda. Burundi and Rwanda share a deeply intertwined complex history of cyclinical ethnic tensions. The current ruling party in Burundi is a former Hutu rebel group. Inside the DRC mountains, Burundi used excuse of hunting its deadliest domestic threat, Red Tabara, a predominantly Tutsi Burundi rebel group dedicated to overthrow the government next door in Gitega. Burundi family believes that Rwanda funds arms and provides logistical sanctuary to Red Tabara. To destroy this threat, Burundi made a transactional deal with the Congolese government. Under the bilateral military and defense agreement, Burundi deployed thousands of troops in Congo and DRC. According to regional reporting and security sources, challenges, Kinshasa agreed to finance the deployment through direct monthly payments and logistical support. Kinshasa wanted help fighting its own enemy, the FC or M23 rebellion. So a trade was made. Burundi sends its army into South Kivu to hunt Red Tabara and help crush M23 sympathizers. In exchange, Kinshasa grants them free rein. And who pays the price? The Banyamulenge. Because they share a cultural lineage, the Burundian military paranoidly view the entire community not only as Congolese citizens, but as permanent strategic threat and an extension of Rwanda. When Burundi burns down Banyamulenge villages and loots their cattle, they are executing a Scott art campaign to ensure Rwanda can never use the high plateaus as a launching pad against them. But what about the rest of the world? Why do global superpowers nations that constantly lecture the world on human rights and international law keep their mouths shut? The silence boils down to global corporate opportunism and technology supply chain. Eastern DRC holds the world's most critical reserve, cobalt, coltan, the exact raw material required to power smartphones, laptops, electric vehicles, and military defense hardware. Global superpowers are locked in a quiet, vicious Cold War to secure these minerals for the global green energy transition. Disrupting relations with the Kinshasa government over the erasure of a minority highland community would risk shutting down the multi-billion-dollar mineral pipeline. Superpowers have made a cold, calculated economic decisions. Cheap technology inputs are worth the cost of Banyamulenge lives. They intentionally label the East DRC as chaotic, unfixable, humanitarian tragedy caused by random fighting. By pretending it's just a messy civil war, they can issue empty statements of deep concern while their multinational corporations continue to ship raw minerals out of the Congolese ports and into global markets. An orchestrated removal hiding inside a large civil war is the perfect crime. It allows the world to profit from the land while looking away from the elimination of its people. But there is one factor: the corporate elites, the corrupt generals, and the extremist militia completely failed to calculate the unyielding spirit of the people on the mountains. When you push a community to the edge of total extinction, you strip them of fear. This defiant mindset was immortalized by the late General Michael Rukunda Makanika, the foundational commander of the Twigwaneho Self-Defense Forces. Makanika knew that laying down their guards meant walking into a fatal trap. He codified the community's refusal to vanish into a legendary generational oath. He declared, "We will fight until our very last drop of blood. Even if we die, our ghost will continue to fight them from these mountains." And he said, "Umugabo araswa mu gahanga ntabwo araswa inyuma. A real man is shot in the forehead, never in the back. Instead of dying while fleeing like cowards into foreign refugee camps, we will die fighting. No one will ever chase us from our fatherland again." Makanika was revealing a profound truth. The current generation of this community has been born and lived into resistance since the 1960s. Fathers have passed their fighting to their sons, and they are passing it to their children today. When an entire ethnic group reaches the point where they prefer absolute physical martyrdom on their ancestral ridges over the compliance of guild cage, the enemy is no longer fighting a standard militia. They are fighting an unbreakable wall of human dignity. By invoking the warrior code of Umugabo araswa mu gahanga, the Highlanders have sent definitive messages to Kinshasa, Gitega, and the world. You can blockade their medicine, you can liquidate their cattle, you can strike them with advanced drones, but you will have to bury them in the soil of their ancestors because they will never run away. We have laid out the entire case. The evidence speaks for itself. The evidence presented throughout this investigation points to a calculated, systematic, and state-complicit pattern of erasure. The Kinshasa government, the Wazalendo, the Burundi military, and their international partners are counting on you being too distracted, too confused, or too indifferent to notice. They use luxury offices, co-opted Banyamulenge as advisors militias and token safe enclaves like Wibogobogo to hide their reality on the ground. But you do not need overt atrocities to commit the ultimate crime. When you stripped a people of their identity, blockade their food, burn their ancestral homes, and liquidate their entire economy on public markets, the intent is clear. Total erasure. We see the tactics, we know the history, we understand the mineral grid, and we can no longer plead ignorance. The world said never again in 1948. It is time to mean it. Break the silence. Share the truth. Stand with the Banyamulenge.